This is the OMG Book Show with William O'Day, episode number 22.
Welcome to the OMG Book Show, where it's all about taking you into the brains of fantastic authors. No scalpels required. It's more than an interview, it's an experience. And now, your host, William O'Day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show today. I feel like maybe I should do more singing on this show. Am I the only one that feels that way? I'm going to look around the room. I do this a lot. You know, it's easy when you look around a room you could go both ways. You could go either way. On the one hand, you could say like, I've got no support, you know, there's nothing that's going to help push me forward. On the other hand, you could say, I've got nothing holding me back, you know? I tend to go for the latter because, right, that's more healthy. That's the positive attitude. In case you were wondering. Oh, man, I shouldn't have done that. Okay. I wish there was one other person who would have raised their hand and was like, no, let's skip that. Anyway, today we have a fabulous show with a mega bestseller, Adam Croft. He actually knocked JK Rowling off the #1 spot in the charts for a period of time and got a screenshot to prove it. We have a lot of fun in the interview today. Adam talks to us about a number of different things, per the usual, but he tells us about the worst job he ever had. And trust me, I've had some pretty bad jobs, but this one sounds, he was like a hate magnet in this job, and you'll hear the details of that. And fortunately, he escaped to live a happier life. He also talks to us about the time he went to prison. Oh my goodness. We're going to hear the details on that. And he tells us kind of his approach and what it takes to become, or at least what it took for him to become a million plus. In fact, I think he said at this point he sold 1.5 million copies of his books. Can you imagine that? That is a lot of books in a lot of readers' hands. Very, very awesome. He even shares with us his preference on the least worst horrible way to die. Yes, I said it in the show notes. You'll learn. You'll laugh. You hopefully won't cry. And it's a lot of fun. And just a little note here that Adam's side of the conversation is just a little bit scratchy for the first 10 minutes or so. So after that, you will hear his voice in its full, intoxicating detail. So without further ado, surgical gloves on, metaphorical scalpel in hand. Let's get started. Thank you for joining us. I am super excited today to bring you an international bestseller by the name of Adam Croft. You've probably heard the name before. He's with us on the show today. Thank you, Adam, so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
There's so many ways that we could kind of start this discussion. Where are you at in the writing life today? I mean, I think for you, if I'm understanding kind of your trajectory of your writing career, 2016 and 2017 were huge years. Is that correct?
Yeah, they were. At the end of 2015, in December, I released my 9th book, Her Last Tomorrow, and that's one that really changed my career. I mean, I had been writing for years before then, doing fine, paying the bills, but that was the one that really took off. And yeah, that sold incredibly well through the whole of 2016. And as a result, I got a 2-book deal with Thomas and Mercer, an imprint of Amazon Publishing. They republished that and published Only the Truth, which is my second psychological thriller, which hit worldwide #1 on store-wide on Amazon US, UK, Australia. All sorts of places. And it's kind of gone from there, really. I'm now on my 4th psychological thriller has just come out, and that's doing really, really well as well. It's doing similar to what Her Last Tomorrow was doing. And I think overall I'm on about 20 books now.
Man, that is, so you've massively, maybe, did you go full time or something after Her Last Tomorrow? Because you, from what I've read, I think maybe started around 2011, and then you're talking about 8 or 9 books a year or two ago,
yeah.
And now you're up to 20. So you're moving now.
Yeah, I'm getting the hang of it now. Yes, I started writing. Well, the first book came out in the first few days of 2011. I think the 4th of January. It was meant to come out before Christmas, but I couldn't work KDP dashboard properly, so it came out at the beginning of January. So yeah, I've sped up since then. Obviously, at first I was doing other things. I wasn't full time with it, but that's kind of gradually changed over time, and yeah, my output has gone up quite a lot, and it's something you have to do. I think once you get to a certain level, you have to keep putting the books out in order to stay there.
Right. And then do you have like a production schedule going forward? Does it, you're looking at it, you're like, okay, every 3 months, every 4, what does that look like for you?
I try to have a production schedule. It doesn't always work out that well, especially with, family and life and things getting in the way. But I normally tend to do about 4 or 5 books a year. If you're including shorts, it can sometimes be a couple more. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm on track for this year as well. So yeah, I have had years before before I was full time where I didn't write anything at all, or didn't publish anything at all. So it was a few years into my career really before I realised that you've really got to keep the pressure up and you've got to keep writing things and keep it fresh.
Right. Yeah, totally. And there's the aspect of getting better at your craft, sitting around thinking about a story isn't quite so beneficial for getting better at actually writing stories,
Yeah. Well, it doesn't get any easier. That's the thing. You'd think it did the more you learn about it, but in many ways it gets more complicated actually. I mean, with the crime series that I write as well, the more I learn about the procedure, the more background knowledge I have, I think that in many ways the harder it is to kind of find a story in there. So yeah, it's not that it gets easier, it's just that I think I'm probably working harder at it now, and it's a case of having to, really.
Right. Yeah, I've heard that same kind of response from a number of different authors over these interviews, is that kind of the first book or two coming out, they, just from lack of knowledge or whatever, they kind of winged it and it seemed to flow easier. But then kind of the better they got, the more knowledge they got, the harder it got because their own expectations, they raised, each successive book.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in that. And I think you can know too much as well. I think sometimes too much information can get in the way of a good story. And for me, I think the thing that I always try to remember, even though I'm speaking to a lot of police officers and a lot of people involved in various things for research, the thing that I always keep at the back of my mind is that the story has to win out. I'm not writing a non-fiction book about how the police system in the UK works. I'm writing books to entertain people. So, sometimes I have to tweak things and change the procedure or have something happen that just wouldn't happen in real life, and things that people wouldn't get away with, because otherwise the story just doesn't work.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think that is easy to forget as a writer. You get kind of so lost in the plot or the words of a scene or whatever, and then you kind of like pull back the lens and you're like, wait, this just needs to be entertaining first.
People aren't reading nonfiction. They've chosen to read fiction for a reason. It's got to be believable. There's no point in having things that just couldn't happen or that defy the laws of physics unless you're writing science fiction or whatever. But the story has to win out. That's the way I always look at it.
Right, absolutely. And I wanted to ask you about the Her Last Tomorrow. That being, it sounds like your breakout book. What do you think there's, from your perspective as the creating end of it, what was different about that? Versus the 8 or so books that came before that really just pushed you over the hill?
Well, that's something I've kind of looked at retrospectively, because it wasn't something that I'd planned. It was a book. It was the first standalone book that I wrote, whereas all my other books had been in series, and everyone always says to keep to a series. Right. It was in a different genre from my previous books, a slightly different genre. It was a psychological thriller as opposed to a crime book. And I don't know, it was a book that I nearly didn't put out. It's a book that I almost certainly nearly didn't finish writing. And I think looking back at it now, it just happened to hit at the right time. I didn't know what psychological thrillers were at the time. I didn't know that's what I was writing. I didn't know how popular they were. So I put it out expecting not much to happen, really. But it did have a very marketable hook. And I had been playing around with Facebook adverts and various similar things around that time. So I think that the hook that the book had, which was "Could you murder your wife to save your daughter?" was something that worked really well with a Facebook advert. And that's really where a lot of the success came from.
It sounds like the direction you're moving in are exploring these interpersonal familial relationships where trust, is usually an implicit part of the arrangement. But in the books that you are writing lately, that gets called into question in a big way. What got you turned in this direction of psychological thrillers versus the crime stuff that came before?
I don't know, really. I think for me, what often fascinates me about even about the crime fiction is the people who are involved in it, the people who are on the receiving end. And rather than writing from the police investigation point of view, I wanted to write something from the point of view of the people that were involved. I think for me, that's quite a large part of what a psychological thriller is. But also, I mean, the ones that I write tend to be in a kind of domestic setting. They're things that affect families, things that affect normal everyday people like you or I. And I think that's why they're popular, because people can relate to the characters. Perhaps young families with kids, or they're people who are out at work every day. They're not following the lives of police officers or people that they can't necessarily relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is a similar sort of thread. I generally write post-apocalyptic and about families and kind of what they would do in these sort of extraordinary circumstances. And I think that connection you're describing is a huge part of the attraction for that genre as well,
Yeah, we need to sympathize with characters. Obviously, that's a lot more difficult to do if you're writing science fiction or fantasy, or you've got to try and put that kind of spin on it somehow so that it's relatable for the reader.
Right. And you said that you almost didn't finish writing Her Last Tomorrow. What happened there? It
was something that had kind of been on the back burner for a little while, mainly for the reasons I said. It wasn't part of a series. It wasn't a genre of book that I'd written before. And I had a bit of trouble trying to get the end worked out as well. I was going around in circles with it and wasn't quite sure where to go with it. And it was it just didn't seem like a priority at the time, really. All of the advice I was getting from people was to write in a series and to stick with what I know. But yeah, thankfully I did finish it.
Right on. Yeah. So that's a good, kind of a good piece of advice for folks is, of course, listen to other people and the successes they have, but also, jump out there and break the rules from time to time.
Yeah. And what you think will be successful isn't always what will be. I've learned that so many times over. The two books that have been most successful for me were the two that I knew didn't put out, and I nearly pulled the plug on so many times. The favourite ones that I've written are my least best-selling ones. Every time, little things. Every time I put a Facebook advert out, I find a really good graphic. I think, yeah, this one's going to do really well, and it doesn't. And a graphic that I nearly didn't use seems to take off. Similar with the descriptions, the blurbs, things like that. It's so many times what I think is going to work and what's going to be best just isn't. So you really have to test and keep trying lots of different things to see what works, because you'll be surprised what readers prefer.
Right. Is it so predictable that you could almost, cause this is reminding me, when my wife went to Europe, and she doesn't have a great sense of direction normally, but somehow in Europe, it became so, opposite of what was the accurate way. Like anytime we were at a point where we were like, I don't know which way to go, she would pick a way, and then we would actually turn 180 degrees and pick the exact opposite. And like 95% of the time, that was right. So I'm wondering if maybe from now, it sounds like if you see something you think, oh, this will never work, you should totally do that.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, we've got the freedom to be able to do so. We're not constrained to writing one book a year for a publisher.
Right.
If you're an independently published author, you're not going to get dropped by a publisher after one or two bad books. We can try these things. You can pull things from the shelves. You can rename things, rewrite them, change covers. You've got complete control to do these things and to throw a lot of science into the art. And that can be really beneficial.
Yeah, and it's super fun to have that kind of freedom. You had mentioned that you also write short stories from time to time. What is there a specific reason? Why do you explore the short story format?
Usually because the ideas aren't good enough to make a full book.
I see. So yeah, just not complex enough or whatever.
Yeah. And I like short stories as well. The way that I write very short chapters. The action tends to kind of jump about between characters and between scenes, because I've got a short attention span myself. So I write the way I like to read,
right.
Which is always good advice anyway. So yeah, short stories are nice to kind of dip in and out of from time to time. Sometimes I have ideas for things that aren't complex enough, or they're just little things I want to touch on, small little vignettes. And it breaks up the tedium of finishing writing one novel and then having to start again with chapter one. Knowing that it's something you can finish writing in a week is almost it's a lot nicer. It's a nice little filler in between, really.
Oh yeah, I love the there is. I mean, and I was analyzing kind of my own writing process last year and where the dips were and things. And it's like you're saying, there being able to finish something in a reasonable amount of time. That carrot is really big, because when you're in a big, 80 or 100,000 word book, every day you make progress, but a lot of times it feels like, am I really making that much progress?
Oh, I know. You sit there for hours slogging away at something, and I mean, I use Scrivener to write, and I've got it shows me my targets, how far I've got left. It divides it up and lets me know how much I need to write each day to stick to my targets. And I'll be sitting there and I've slogged away for days and days, and it will tell me that I've only got 31 writing days left in the book, and I'm just thinking, I can't do another 31 days of this. But I'm very lucky to have the job that I have. So I'd rather do 31 days of that than 31 days of working on a farm or something. So
yeah, it is all relative. That is for sure. And I use Scrivener as well. And it's like you're saying, it can be a very harsh mistress if you need it to be.
Oh, it lets you know what's what. That's for sure.
Well, it sounds like you do have a pretty regimented writing schedule. Do you have like every day, like, I need to do 2,000 words or that kind of thing? Or how does it organized for you?
Yeah, when I've got a book on, I try and do about 2,000 words is my minimum normally. But again, Scrivener lets me know. So if I go over some days, then, I've got, I have to write fewer words the next day. So, it all works out in the end. I try and, when I write a book, try and have an end date in mind and work around that. But yeah, I do have little gaps in between books, and I think you need to, especially if you've been living in that world for so long, and especially if you've still got edits to do and things like that, and pre-release planning for it. You kind of have to stick with that for a little bit, for a few weeks before you jump into the next one.
Yeah, that's something I've been working on as well. Is last year I found that I would finish a story, but there would be this huge length of time, like really way too long, between finishing that one, doing some editing on it, etc., and getting into the next one. So, like, how are you planning the next book while you're writing one book, or when do you get to kind of the phase of starting thinking about the next project?
I try and keep them separate if I can. I try and wait until I finish one. And I'll sit down and I'll plan the next one and try and just focus on that, rather than other things. But yeah, my days are broken up with other things. I spend a lot of time on the marketing. I do, things like this, podcast interviews. I present a podcast as well with a fellow writer of mine, Robert Dawes, called Partners in Crime, which is about crime fiction and books and TV and films. So it breaks the day up really. And, I think if you're just sitting there solidly writing, solidly living in this fictional world, it could finish you.
Right. You mean to say you could end up in an insane asylum? I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, it would make a great book.
Right. All right. That's the next project coming up. Well, I wanted to ask, we're kind of jumping into how things are going recently with the big successes that you've had over the last couple of years. But jumping back a few steps, I think you're saying around 2011, 2010, what, you were in some other job. I think maybe, did I read internet marketing? Is that right? Yeah, I've done all sorts of things. But at that time I was, running my own company doing marketing for websites and things, yeah. And then how did all of a sudden, or maybe it wasn't all of a sudden, how did the idea of writing a big scary novel come into your head? Well, I'd always wanted to write, and I started with an idea I had on holiday in 2008, and it took me 2.5 years to write what was basically a 20,000 word novella. Just working at it on and off because I thought it's not something I'm ever going to get published or make any money from. It's just a bit of a pipe dream, really. But I got it finished, and around the time I did, I was looking up online what I could do with it, and the Kindle had just been launched over here in the UK, and we were able to publish our own books. So I thought, well, I'll give it a go. I thought I'd put it out there, and it kind of went from there, really. The first one
took off quite nicely, as you were saying earlier, just completely by accident, really. It was a lot easier in those days when there weren't so many people doing it. And yeah, it took me, years really to work out what had happened and how to capitalize on that, because I just kind of had got lucky on the first one, got completely lucky, didn't know how it had worked, why it had worked, and spent the next few years researching and working out how to market a book and how to market myself as an author as well. And I suppose my marketing experience might have come in useful in some ways in terms of the principles, but marketing books is so different from anything else.
What was the name of that first the novella that you're talking about?
Too Close for Comfort was the first one. It's that was the first book in what's now become the Knight and Culverhouse series, and I'm working on the 8th book in that series now.
Wow, that's amazing! Congratulations on that.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's good. It's going well. It's a crime fiction series set in a fictional town, which is based on the hometown that I grew up in, and it seems to be going well and getting a good following. So and it's amazing, really, from that novella how the world and characters have kind of built out from there, really.
Yeah, it is. It's fun when you can get reader feedback and enthusiasm, and then of course that drives your own sense of creativity and wanting to explore it more deeply.
It does, yeah. And I knew nothing about these characters when I started writing them. I knew kind of what their personalities were like, and I now know so much about them. And it's the books have kind of become sort of 50% about the case that they're investigating and 50% about their personal and private lives, because we're just getting to know them so much and the things that they've gone through and how that's affected them. And that's something that readers seem to like as well. There's this kind of really personal level to the books.
Yeah, absolutely. And that first novella, have you, since the day that you released it all those years ago, have you since gone back with kind of like the more experienced, knowledgeable Adam Croft and like revised it? Or are you just like, that was me then and people are going to love it?
Not recently. I did a couple of years after it came out. Because it really did need an update. The first 2 books I did do a bit of a refresh. I don't really want to go back to them again now. I mean, I'd love to, because I think every book that I write could be re-edited and re-released every couple of years. But if I did that, I would never write any new ones.
Yeah, that's true.
I think where would I stop? Could I go back? Even if I went back just 3 years, I think my writing's got a lot better in that time. But 3 years ago, I had 8 books out. And I can't go back and edit and rewrite all of those, because I won't get another one out this year. And I think the focus has got to be on getting new ones out, because people who have already read the previous books aren't going to care if I've taken a few mistakes out.
Right. And at a certain point, it's like I think you're kind of implying as well, is there's only so much polishing that is worthwhile for the investment versus return,
Yeah. I mean, the reason that I went back and edited the first 2 Knight and Culverhouse books is the first 2 were written or were released in the first half of 2011, and the 3rd book wasn't released until the summer of 2015. So it was a long time before I went back, over 4 years before I went back and revisited that series and developed it into what it is. And there is was a big shift in quality between book 2 and book 3, because I'd written kind of 4 other books in that time.
Right on.
In another series. So that's kind of why I went back and edited those, so that they were, up to the same kind of standard as the rest of the series.
Right on. And if you could look back or somehow send a message back through time to the Adam Croft of 2011, what would you tell your younger writing self?
Sit down and write every day, because that turning point, that tipping point, will come at some point. It may well have come sooner if I'd written more and written more quickly. And yeah, just to get more books out, really, because now I'm kind of seeing the benefit of residuals. There's books that I wrote 6-7 years ago that are still selling copies each day and are still making money, and I'm not doing any work on those because I wrote them years back. So the sooner you write those books, the sooner you get them out there, the more the sooner they start earning money, and the more you're going to earn in the long run.
Right. And I think I totally agree. I think there's an aspect of, like turning professional, like you aren't just writing when the mood strikes. You aren't just writing when, you have this killer idea, that you want to explore, but you're actually sitting down. For me, it's not quite every day, like 6-7 days of the week or whatever, but yeah, there is a commitment of like, this is every day. This requires, priority.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's my job. I always say that if I was working in a supermarket, I wouldn't get away with being able to say, oh, you know what, I don't feel inspired to work today. I'd be fired on the spot.
You're like, the peaches aren't inspiring to me today.
Exactly. This is my job. I'm very, very fortunate to be able to do what I do. And there's absolutely no reason why I should get away with saying, I don't want to write, or I can't be bothered, or it's not inspiring me. I wouldn't get away with that in any other job. I would lose that job very quickly. And I think if you're a writer, the same applies. But the only person who's going to lose you that job is you, if you don't put the time and the effort in.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I agree. Would you say this is this the best job you've ever had?
I think so. Yeah, probably second only to father.
Yeah, that's a really good job. That's a tough job too, but it's a great job.
It is, yeah. It makes writing seem easy.
You have, I think I had read somewhere, do you have a 1-year-old? Is that right?
I do, yes. Yeah, just turned one a couple of weeks ago.
What's the most recent sort of debacle you've had to navigate as a father?
Oh, well, there's something new every day. He's on the move now as well, which makes it difficult. You can't blink, and he's gone, and he's trying to pull something off a shelf or do something. He's recently learnt as well that he knows when he's doing something naughty, because he'll go to pull something off a shelf, and just before he does it, he'll reach his hand out to the thing. He'll look up at you, shake his head, and then do it. Because he knows that shaking the head is associated with that, and he does it. He preempts it, and I'm just looking at him thinking, why do you do this? Why do you do it?
Oh, I think he's like, yes, he's exploring the concept of boundaries and how to break them.
Yeah, and gravity.
Oh, and yeah, that is funny too. I remember a phase one of my younger daughter Viva went through, and I'm sure maybe a lot of kids do this, but yeah, you're like, they're sitting in the high chair with the food, and they kind of look at you, look at the food, look at you, look at the food, and then just push the food off on the floor just to see gravity in action.
Yeah. If you want to know how gravity works, I've got some great textbooks you could read, but that'd be a slightly less messy way to learn about it.
Right. And I'm curious, what's the culture in the UK like around the safety of kids? Because in the United States, I think it's changed over generations, over time. Like nowadays, and even we did it when our girls were younger. We have 8 and 10-year-old now, but like you put like foam little corners on all the sharp cabinets. You plug in like the little light socket covers, and you put a gate at the where the stairs go down and things like that. Is it as similar over there?
It is, yeah. I mean, the market for baby stuff is absolutely huge. Yeah. And they will sell you whatever you want to buy. We've got stair gates and things like that, because they're just kind of sensible, really. We haven't gone around protecting every corner and every edge, because for a couple of reasons, really. I mean, we both work at home. My wife works with me on the back office and marketing side of things. So we're both around all the time. He's never left on his own. Touch wood, in a year we've had no no bumps and accidents other than the usual things. And it's also he's got to learn that head-butting a corner hurts, so don't do it.
Yeah, it is. I agree. There's a kind of a certain balance that you keep as a parent, or at least I try to. It's like you want them to give them enough freedom to explore and even potentially hurt themselves in a minor way.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason we know that hot stuff hurts is because we've all touched an oven at some point while it's been on. So,
right.
You've got to strike a balance. And I think that's, touch wood. So far, we seem to have done okay on that front.
Right on. Well, I will tell you, being a little bit down the road from where you are with regards to fatherhood, is that it is what you're saying. It's an ever evolving puzzle. Like just when you feel like you're starting to get a handle on a particular kind of age and outlook, then, now they're in the new phase, and that everything that you did learn is not quite pointless, but it doesn't quite apply.
Yeah. Constantly learning, and it's a lot like writing in that way. It's something you never really become an expert at. It's something you're always learning. You sometimes feel a bit more confident about it, and then something happens that completely knocks you for six. So yeah, I think they're very similar jobs in that respect.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's one of the things I love about writing is it's really up to you. I mean, you can kind of burn out of your own accord or whatever, but the writing itself and the ability to explore is endless. It can be a lifelong adventure.
It certainly is. Yeah, it's one that I'm looking forward to exploring for a few years as well.
Well, so we know you kind of what your best jobs are or were, I guess are. What about what's the worst job you've ever had?
Oh dear. I think I used to work in an inbound call center for a telecoms operator over here that did phone and broadband and TV. And I was the guy that you got through to when you hadn't paid your bill for months, and and your TV got cut off, your internet got cut off, and your phone got cut off, except for two numbers that you could ring. One of which was 999, which is the equivalent of 911 over there, and the other one was me. Anytime you tried to make a phone call, it would come through, and I would be there explaining that the reason you couldn't make a phone call and the reason you were coming through to me was that you hadn't paid your bill in 4 months and that I needed some money out of you before you could call your friends, which wasn't a nice job because nobody that I spoke to was particularly happy to be doing so. And yeah, it was kind of the opposite of everything that I am, really. Going in 9 till 5 in an office block where you couldn't even see out the windows, speaking to angry people, dealing with money, all the things I'm not very good at, really.
Man, I don't know. I'm sure maybe some people are good at those things, but I'm not sure anyone would really enjoy that because it's almost like police officers, and maybe you probably have better experience with this than me just from your research, but police officers, just by the nature of their jobs, run into so many people, not all, but so many people that are having bad days. So I imagine it would be hard not to get jaded over time.
Yeah, but it teaches you a lot about people. I mean, for instance, it set me up brilliantly for things like reviews and critical comments about my work, because I've been called all the names under the sun doing that job, and the same over again as an author. But I mean, I over the last probably 2 years now at least, I just don't read my reviews on Amazon at all. I look at the average star rating, and as long as that's above 4, then I'm happy. But yeah, you just learn that everyone's got an opinion. I've sold 1.5 million books. Not everyone will have liked them. As long as 90% of them have, then I'm doing the right thing as far as I can see. The fact that 1 or 2 people have emailed me and said that they didn't like the book, or that I'm the cause of all the evil in the world, or whatever. It's it's largely irrelevant in the larger picture. Really, life goes on.
I can see what they're talking about, though. In your Facebook photo I'm looking at here, it's your eyes. You've got devious eyes. No, yes. Not really. That's
the evil inside. That is. Although I do get some very strange comments about, especially some of the subject matters of the books is quite dark. You do get people who think that somehow my books are inspiring people to go out and commit murders, and that they're glorifying them.
Do they say like you're giving people good or bad ideas, but done in a good way or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, these are fictional novels. They're not instruction manuals. It's there's a range of different opinions out there, and that's one of the things about this job. It is fascinating, really, to especially when you get feedback from readers, to see how many different people there are with different opinions, different backgrounds, and it does pull you out of your little bubble sometimes.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's like you're saying, it's so important. And maybe it's like, did you back in the day when you were, kind of on the front side of this building success that you have, were you way into reading reviews then, or was it never a huge priority for you?
Yeah, I did for a few years. Yeah. And slowly came to realize that, there was absolutely no reason to do so. As long as people were enjoying the books and emailing me to let me know they were, as long as the overall average star rating on Amazon was good, then that was the main thing. Because the way the human brain works, it's weird. You probably know yourself. You can look through book reviews on Amazon. You read 10 5-star reviews about it, and then you get one 1-star review. And the only one you think about is the 1-star review, which is ridiculous because, you've got over 90% positive feedback there. Yet you only focus on that less than 10% that didn't like it. And I thought, well, this is bizarre. Why am I doing this? The most important thing is that most people are enjoying it and that the sales keep going up each time and more people are buying the books and more people are enjoying them. That's far more important than what, Mary somebody in Kansas thought of it, on her own. If everybody was saying those things and everybody disliked it, then, it's time for me to sit up and listen and to change things. But, as long as I'm getting, 95, 96% positive feedback, that's the best I can hope for, really.
Yeah. And don't worry about Mary. Mary in Kansas. She trashes.
She does it to everyone, doesn't she?
She does.
Oh, no.
Look at her Amazon profile. It's 1 stars across the board. One comment on that. I totally agree. I think there's 2 aspects to it. I think I read even somewhere, it's been a while, and so I'm probably going to butcher this, but I think I had read somewhere that just in evolutionary terms, humans tend to look at the negative because, like back in the caveman, way back in the day, prehistory, the negative things were what could kill you and kind of end your cycle faster than, say, like, something positive. Oh, I found a bit of fruit. Oh, but there's a tiger right next to it,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, it just triggers something in your brain because somebody's saying, "Oh, your books are great, and I really like you." That's no threat to you whatsoever. The warning signals aren't going to go off. But when somebody says, you're the reason why children get murdered and things like that sends off big warning signals in your brain, and that is going to be disturbing thing. But it's sad to say, but the more you hear it, the less shocking it becomes. I think the most shocking negative comment I got was probably the first one. I don't remember what it was, but they tend to bother you less and less each time now. And sometimes you get them emailed or sent to you on Facebook, and within a couple of words you can very quickly pick up the tone, and you can see that somebody's not really going down the right tracks here, and you just hit delete, get a cup of tea, and move on with your life. It's it's part of the job, really.
Yeah, and I think I was just talking to another author a couple of days ago about this, Logan Keyes, and she was mentioning that idea of, like, writers are different in some ways from other creative arts because, especially, like an actor or a singer or whatever, it's expected that you would go in front of people and perform your art and craft. And, and you're going to get a feedback, but you still got to push through that. And for authors, sometimes there's this idea, well, you can just write in your own sort of sequestered world, but you'll never be potentially subjected to feedback like that. So I think it's interesting you're talking about that. And maybe it's part of turning professional is, realizing, yes, feedback's coming, but I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to keep doing what I have to do.
Yeah, and we write because we want people to read it at the end of the day. So if people are going to read it, people are going to offer their feedback. Everyone's got an opinion. If you worked any other job, you would be interested in what your boss or your employer's opinion of you was. And our readers as a whole and as a unit are our bosses, are our employers. So that's why I said before, it's worth looking at what the overall view of you is, what the overall reviews on each of your book are, rather than the individual little things, because you can get bogged down with detail. Look at the overall. Does your boss in general think you're doing a good job? And that's the best you can do, really.
Yeah, and and I found myself in the past, not recently, I think I'm through that phase. Maybe it's part of the beginning kind of turning professional phase, but where you do read a few of reviews like that, and then it just, like, I mean, maybe you built up psychological armor from this previous job, but like it just hits you in the gut, and then it kind of like drains your creativity for a period of time while you kind of get over that psychological hurdle, and in the end you just kind of look back at it and think like, yeah, that was totally pointless. Don't do it again.
I mean, weirdly enough, the thing that works best, I found, and the thing I look forward to the most on each new book that I release is the first 1-star review. Honestly, because sales go up every time I get the first 1-star review or the first 2-star review. Because as soon as I release a book, the first people who have gone and bought it and who have pre-ordered it and who have read it within hours of it coming out are the kind of hardcore dedicated fans.
Right.
And they'll go straight away leave a review. So, after a day or so, you have a couple of dozen 5-star reviews and nothing else. And that can always look a little bit difficult, especially when you're trying to market the book on Facebook or advertise it somewhere. And, people who've never heard of you are hitting the page and they're just seeing, all 5-star reviews. It can look a bit fake. So, somebody lowering that average down to 4.5 stars out of 5 rather than 5 out of 5 actually does quite a lot of good. It makes the score look a lot more balanced and a lot more realistic.
Right.
And sales tend to go up every time. I mean, I don't know if people leave reviews hoping to damage sales or what they personally get from it, but it's actually very helpful.
Okay, well let's be clear, everyone. Adam is not encouraging you to go bomb his novels with 1 and 2-star reviews. I'm just saying let's put that disclaimer out there.
Yeah, well, if they've got all 5-star reviews, then please do. But otherwise, don't worry.
Right on. Well, the nature, I wanted to ask you about the nature of psychological thrillers, suspense thrillers like this, and even mysteries in general, is pretty complex. Like you're trying to lead the reader astray, in different directions, and before finally getting to hopefully a big twist at the end. Do you find writing in this genre to be very challenging? Like like every book is a new sort of puzzle to figure out. Yeah. I mean, you've got to keep surprising people, and you've got to keep the twists coming as well. Something I have in all of my books is some kind of twist in the middle and a twist at the end as well, just to keep people on their toes. And it is difficult sometimes. It's not really a case of kind of running out of ideas, but trying to think of a way of keeping it fresh and how to keep confounding people's expectations, because if you keep doing it in the same way, then people know the kind of tools and devices that you use, and they can try and second guess you, and it's almost like a double bluff sometimes. So it is difficult, but every crime book is a puzzle. And that's something that I enjoy, putting that puzzle together and trying to figure it out myself as well while I'm in the planning stage, why somebody would want to kill this person, how they might have hidden that and covered it up and sent the investigators down the wrong road a few times. So it's something that I really enjoy planning and putting together. Right on. And then after, having written as many books as you have, do you have a framework from which you approach every new book, or is like everyone just like a blank slate and you're just starting from scratch? It's
kind of a bit of both. There is a skeleton of story. There's a beginning, a middle, and end. There's an act structure. That's the same with all story. I don't have a formula as such. I've got things that I tend to usually do. I tend to have chapters of around 1,000 words. I tend to have one viewpoint each chapter, and to switch and to kind of have different threads running concurrently and switch between them and kind of bring them all together at the end. I think that's just my style of writing, really, rather than a kind of a set formula, though.
And do you have looking at your catalog, it seems like, there is variation, but it is kind of all within the crime, mystery, suspense thriller genre, which, they're kind of mixing there, but there is a general nature to it. Do you have aspirations or ideas about dabbling in other genres in the future?
I'd like to. But I don't really read enough of other genres to consider myself to be at a level where I could write competently in them. I'd like to have a go, maybe just for my own purposes, but no plans at the moment. I think I've got to keep the crime books coming as well, because that's what the readers are looking for, and I'm at that stage now where I need to keep capitalizing on what's already happened and keep building things up.
Yeah, yeah, and you definitely have obviously already built a really strong brand, so readers can run to you knowing and looking forward to what you put out.
I hope so.
Clearly, obviously, it's the reason we're talking here. Writing is a huge part of your life. You're also a new father as well. What other kinds of things, like when you're not being a father and not being a writer? Well, I don't know. Is there any time for other things? But let's assume there is. Do you have? What do you like to do in your pastime?
I think the thing that I find most relaxing is my garden. I'm a very keen gardener. I like to get out there and look after my plants and raise them, and just generally enjoy being outside, really, and playing with the soil and all of those things. It's just very relaxing, I think, for me. That's probably my main thing. Yeah.
And what's your favorite thing to grow?
Oh, I don't know. I don't really grow too much from seed. I've been doing quite a lot recently. I've been growing some herbs and things for the kitchen because we've been using so much and buying it in every week. I figured it'd be easier just to grow them. So I've been working on that recently. But I quite like kind of more exotic plants and things, which we don't get a lot of over here because we've got such a changeable climate. We get in the summer it can be getting on for 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and it'll be below freezing a lot of the time. Last week it was -10 for a lot of the week. We were under 2 feet of snow. So it's it changes so much. So it's nice and challenging.
Yeah. I think it's important too, like you're saying, to have some sort of, like you're saying, it's very relaxing just to have some sort of outlet. I have a dog that pretty much is at my knee, pretty much 20 hours of the day. I don't know, 18 hours a day, looking and begging, like, it's time for a walk. Is it time for a walk? Let's go for a walk. Which is great. We have beautiful nature around here, and we just go out and walk for hours.
Yeah, it's something to relax you. I mean, even writing, it can seem relaxing a lot of the time, but especially when you're doing it professionally and full time, the pressure's on, and especially when you're writing what I'm writing, and you're dealing with some pretty gruesome subjects, and even if you're researching, you're speaking to people who have experienced sexual abuse and things like that when you're trying to research books. So sometimes you do just need to kind of just get in the moment, really. I mean, with writing, I'm always I'm either living in a fictional world, or I'm planning ahead, or I'm talking about previous books. It's very rarely that you're kind of there in the moment and actually doing something for that exact moment in time. So I think doing something like gardening and getting out there and doing something that is of the moment is quite relaxing, really. It just kind of brings you back down to earth, if you pardon the pun.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Well, do you have, writing the subject material that you do, you're talking about is disturbing and dark in many ways. Is your dream life affected? Are you a guy that has to deal with nightmares, or how's that work for you?
Not really, no. I haven't had anything kind of creep in that way. I suppose it does affect you negatively in some ways. You'd probably end up becoming a bit more pessimistic about things, perhaps, when you realise what human beings can do and what they're capable of, and what's what people have to deal with, and what goes on every day in every town around the world. It's sometimes that does kind of start to grind you down after a while, but you can't let it affect you. Those things will happen whether you worry about them or not. And I think that's why having that downtime and having those things that allow you to just be in the moment, to use a mindfulness term, I think are vital, really.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And speaking of mindfulness, one of the things that I do and I find really helpful in that regard is just do 10 minutes of meditation every day. Like it just kind of is a way to center the morning and just kind of keep all the crazy monkey thoughts from overwhelming, at least for a while. Do you do anything like that?
I do, yes. Yeah, I've used an app on my phone that does that. I've not used it in a little while, probably should do. But yeah, I've used it kind of on and off for a few years now. And I found that really helped. So I went through a phase where I didn't write anything for a long, long time. And I sort of came back, and when I wrote the third Night in Culverhouse book, what I was saying to you earlier, I had a 4-year gap. That was about that time. Then I started to discover things like that, and sitting and having 10 minutes just to kind of meditate and sit there. And even now, when I write, I have an incense stick burning. I have some music playing in my ears. It's kind of Tibetan bowl music, which I know sounds a little bit hippie and weird, but it's what I had on to kind of focus and concentrate when I was writing that book. And I wrote that book in record time. I think it was the most accomplished book I'd written at that point, and it still is one of my best. And it just kind of, I link being able to write with that now. So when it's time to write, I'll come into my office, I'll put my headphones on, I play the music, I light incense, the phone is switched off, and it just kind of, it's almost like a Pavlovian reaction. It just sort of tells my brain, right, it's time to write now. It's time to switch it on and do the magic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you're getting into the zone. And while it does, I agree with you, it does sound somewhat hippie-ish, which I'm totally cool with. I live in Northern California. But at the same time, I'm sure you probably heard, or maybe you haven't, of brain.fm, the website. You go and you click and it's, Tibetan bowl music. There's different, I mean, it's the high-tech equivalent of really just the same thing. There's like these sort of, what is it, like kind of panning tones and just basically sorts of gets you into the mood to be creative.
Yeah. I mean, lots of people like to have music on and things when they write, but I find that if I have anything with lyrics in, I'm just listening to those. If there are other words floating around in my mind that aren't the ones that I'm writing, it's no good for me. So I have to have something that's instrumental anyway, whether it's something classical or jazzy or the Tibetan bowl music. It's got to be something just to kind of be there in the background and keep a nice kind of calm focus while I'm writing.
Right. Shifting gears a little bit, I was looking at your webpage the other day and just kind of reading about you, and I checked out your about page, and clearly, you mentioned some of the amazing success you had, which is awesome. But what I noticed was interesting, aside from that, was that there are not the usual pedantic details of like, I live in Sussex, with a cat, and I love taking walks on the beaches, and things of that nature. Here's my question. Are you hiding something?
No, I just don't think that anybody really cares about those things, about my hobbies and my interests. I don't know. I think, I don't know if it's just me, but, if I'm reading someone's books, I want to know what their books are about. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm being modest, but, I just don't think anyone really cares what I do in my spare time or where I live.
All right. Well, I want you to know we care, but we love your about page anyway.
Oh, thank you.
There's one other thing I noticed about your about page, and I'm kind of reading between the lines here, so maybe I'm off target. So let me know. But do you have something against JK Rowling? Because I saw several different times you're like, "Ha, JK Rowling, I'm better." Woo!
I don't, but I think she might have something against me now. Yeah, no, I knocked her off the number one spot in Canada once.
That's awesome.
And I think February last year, 2017, when Only the Truth came out, and that was number one store-wide, worldwide on Amazon. Amazon have their author rankings, and I think for a couple of days they had me ranked as the most widely read author in the world, and she was number two. So yeah, quick screenshot and kept that before it disappeared.
Yeah, if you can unseat, I mean, amazing, congratulations. If you can unseat JK Rowling, then you're absolutely doing something right.
Yeah, for a few hours. I don't think she was too bothered. She's been there for about 5 years before and for a year since. So yeah, she's certainly doing a lot better than I am.
Here's an idea, and I don't even know if JK Rowling does public appearances anymore, but if she's at a book signing or conference or whatever, it might be worth, just for the sake of hilarity, to wear a T-shirt with that little like ranking 1 and 2 and 3 printed
with a screenshot on it.
Yeah, and just go meet her and shake her hand, and don't even mention the T-shirt, and see if she says something.
That's a great idea. Yeah, I might do that. Good publicity stunt as well.
Yeah, right. You have somebody filming it, could be hilarious.
Absolutely. I like it.
Well, one thing I also wanted to ask about, I was perusing your Facebook feed, and I can't remember when it was a while ago, 6 months or something, where you had gone into a prison to have a discussion with inmates. What was that all about?
You have been doing your research, haven't you?
And when you were 6 years old, no, I don't know that.
Even I don't remember that far back. 6 months I can just about remember. I was asked to come into a prison about 10 miles up the road from me, not because I'd done anything nefarious, but because they wanted me to do a talk to the prisoners who have a creative writing program there. And the prison system in this country is very much about, we've got very, very overcrowded prisons, so we're trying not to throw people in there for the sake of it, because we just don't have the room or the space.
Right.
So it's very much about the kind of the rehabilitation, trying to get people back to be good members of society, rather than it used to be years back, kind of lock them up and throw away the key, and that didn't help anybody. So we're trying to kind of rehabilitate people, give them some skills, get them out there, actually being a functioning and valuable member of society, rather than being a pest. So they run this creative writing workshop for some of the prisoners there, and they wanted me to come in and do a talk to them and to judge some of the stories that they'd written. And it was fascinating, actually. A lot of the quality of the writing was really, really good. And the thing that really surprised me was that it was written, all of them were written completely without any kind of airs and graces. There was no attempts to be writing like somebody else. They were all such authentic voices, without exception. They all wrote in their own voice, and that's something that it's so many writers don't do. So many writers are trying to write like other people, or they read books and they think, oh, this is the way I need to write. Right. And it was fascinating just seeing those different voices and those different styles, and how keen they all were on writing and finding out more about how to get better at it. And I'm thinking, these are people here who have, put people in intensive care units. They've tried to kill people. They've done armed robberies, and they're sitting here, asking me about how to become better writers. And it's just the two things in your brain just don't tend to meet. Talk about never judging a book by its cover. You've got a sort of 7 foot tall, massive, great big guy with tattoos, and he's asking me about what he should do about this character's love life, and I'm thinking, this is just the weirdest experience of my life. But that's
surreal.
It's also really, really rewarding as well, to know that writing and crafting stories is something that they get so much out of. And so many of them were saying that it's something that calmed them and made them think about other things in life, and rather than kind of turning to darker thoughts, they were kind of channeling their energies in a different way.
Yeah, that's very cool. And when you are interacting in this, what would you call it? I guess a meeting. Were you teaching? I guess you were teaching them. What was the kind of the thrust of it?
Yeah, well, it was kind of a little talk and a Q&A session, and they'd sent me, I think, 8 or 9 different short stories that they'd written beforehand that I got to read through and announce the winners of there. So it was really interesting.
And did you have any concern about offering critical feedback to a group of potentially extremely dangerous gentlemen?
Yeah, I told them they were all fantastic.
Smart move.
Yeah, they were all good. They were all very good. There was, there's none of them that I would have said, don't bother writing. There's always at least 1 or 2 or 3 aspects there that I thought actually they could really build on. And there's, it's incredible the talent that was there. And it's actually quite sad to think that, they're chosen to go down a different path. Rather than using those talents, they've chosen to do something really daft and really stupid to end up in there in the first place. Right. And also quite humbling as well to know that they'd had to do something like that and go through something like that in order to essentially be given this opportunity and to discover writing, and to have someone sit down and say, hey, how do you fancy doing a creative writing class? Because if somebody had said that to someone on the outside, I don't think very many of them would have taken up the offer.
Right. Well, hopefully they'll strike a new direction, and maybe that could help them kind of get where they need to be.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, we're getting near the end of the show, and that can mean only one thing. Welcome to the Rorschach round, where we use ambiguously odd questions to delve deeper into the minds of these amazing authors. Let's get started. But before we go, we have something called the Rorschach round. Have you heard of it?
I haven't. No, I'm worried now.
It's the Rorschach test. You're probably familiar with ink blots. Psychiatrists, psychologists, maybe, I don't know. They look at and try to interpret and see into your mind. So that is what we are going to try to do.
That's something you don't want to see into.
Okay. Well, I didn't say we're going to go deep. We're just going to stay right along the comfortable edges.
Good. There aren't many, but go on.
Okay, here we go. So first question, serial killer or serial spiller?
Serial killer? I don't know. What's the difference? What am I being asked here? What's going on?
See, some of these, it's like the ink blot test. Some of them are very vague and don't necessarily mean anything.
Okay.
This one would be, it's hard to see because, you don't see the word here. But you have serial killer on the one hand, but then you have serial spiller as in cereal for breakfast.
Gotcha.
Yeah. See,
okay.
All right. Well, we'll put that one away and we'll come back to it some other day.
We'll call that a practice run, that one.
Yeah, that was good. Okay. All right. So next question. Death by 1,000 cuts or death by 1,000,000 nuts?
I quite like nuts. So yeah, death by 1,000,000 nuts.
Okay. And question 3. Would you rather drown or be burned to death?
Oh, God. Burned to death. At least I'll be warm.
Yeah, that's a good, and it's cold sometimes, like you're mentioning in England. So what a way to go. All
absolutely.
Right. All right. Let's put that one up against burned to death or buried alive in a casket.
Oh, definitely burned to death. Yeah. Being buried alive is one of my biggest fears. So yeah, that's an easy one.
Has that jumped into any of your stories yet?
It has actually. Yeah, it has. It did creep into 2 actually.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. That deep fear. And the final question, can anyone truly be trusted?
Oh, that's deep. I don't think you ever know. I think you only know whether you can trust somebody when they break your trust. It's a little bit like Schrodinger's cat, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Adam, that is a fascinating Rorschach round. Thank you so much for participating. And wait, do you want to have another go at serial killer or serial spiller, or should we just leave that behind?
I'll stick with my first answer. Why not?
Okay. Right on. Well, do you have, here at the end of the show, I like to have a minute to two to talk about, do you have any new or upcoming projects that folks should be on the lookout for?
In terms of books, I don't tend to announce them until they're a lot more finished than this one is. I'm only about a quarter of the way through the next one. So no announcements on that front. But if you do like crime fiction, if you are a fan of crime thrillers or TV dramas, then the Partners in Crime podcast that I present with Robert Dawes, fellow crime writer and TV actor, that's been going very well at the moment. We had some very high profile guests on there. It's available on iTunes and Stitcher and all the usual places. The website's partnersincrime.online if you like that kind of thing.
Very cool.
But yeah, got lots of things coming up. Certainly keeping myself busy.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And aside from the Partners in Crime podcast, if folks want to find out more about you and what you do, where should they go look?
My website is adamcroft.net. I'm on Twitter at Adam Croft. I've got a Facebook page as well under my name. I think that's about it.
Right on. Well, I'll make sure and get those links in the show notes so people can easily access them. And Adam, I just wanted to say once again, thank you so much. It's been really a lot of fun having you on the show today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the interview as much as I did. A special thank you to Adam for joining us on the show today. It was a lot of fun. And just to be clear, he doesn't actually really have any problem with JK Rowling. That was more what I was bringing to it. Maybe I have a problem with JK Rowling. No, I don't really have a problem with her. Actually, yes, I do. Actually, JK Rowling, if you're listening to this, my only problem with you is this. I need you to write another book in the Harry Potter universe, and not this cursed child. I don't want to use any foul language here, but not a book like that written by somebody else in some kind of weird playwright, made for the stage form. A real book in the Harry Potter universe. Please, please. please. Anyway, I would enjoy that. My whole family would enjoy that. So if you're out there and you somehow listen to this, we all love you. And of course, you know that. I'm sure you understood that when you were sitting on like $1 billion in cash. Do people do that? Anyway, I think it would be fun. Moving on, though, if you would like to check out any of the links mentioned in the show today, you can go to the usual place at www.williamoday.com/22. That is always the number of the episode. That's it for today. If you would like to be sure to never miss a show and always have them immediately available on your device of choice, you can subscribe by going to www.williamoday.com/iTunes. And if you enjoyed the show, I would so appreciate a rating and review on iTunes. They both help with store visibility, and they also let other listeners know if this show is something that they might be interested in checking out. And I've made it easy to access both of those by going to the same link on my website, www.williamoday.com/iTunes. That will have a link there that you can jump over to either subscribe and or maybe all three, rate and review the show. So I would so appreciate that. Thank you so much. That's it for now. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the OMG Book Show. You can find out more at www.williamoday.com.